The most obsolete idea is go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest for the long term in the stock market. See, why would you save money when they're printing trillions of dollars? The gap between the 1% and 99% is massive. You see, it's not just money. You have to step back and look at the bigger picture. So what do? In every one of us, there's a poor person. There's still a poor person inside me. There's also a middle-class person, and the middle-class person wants security. They want that steady paycheck. And there's a rich person. And they're all inside of us, except that it's not taught. You're taught to go to school, get a job, and get a paycheck. Not taught how to get rich. If you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my rich dad refused to pay me. He said the paycheck was one of the most damaging things you can take in your life. He says the moment you take a paycheck, you're an employee. And that's the mindset. So my rich dad never paid me. It drove my poor dad, a government employee, nuts. You gotta pay people. You gotta pay people. And rich dad was not saying that the paycheck was bad. He says he didn't want to be a slave to money. So as an entrepreneur, if rich dad folded, I just try another company. I don't need a paycheck. I don't need anybody to take care of me. If my government doesn't like me, I move to another country because they need entrepreneurs there. So the entrepreneur is not so much the business. The entrepreneur is really the mindset and the skill sets and the different set of rules. See, I don't operate, small business does not operate in the same rules as big business. Entrepreneur is a mindset first, a skill set and rules, and depending upon whether you're an employee or small business, the rules are different, the mindsets are different, the skill sets are different. If you could say one thing to somebody who's never been an entrepreneur and they're thinking about making the leap of faith into becoming an entrepreneur, what could you tell them? Well, I'll just tell them the same thing that happened to me. My last paycheck, I still remember it clearly. It was one of the worst and the best days of my life. And I was in Puerto Rico. I was working for Xerox, and my boss gave me my last, it wasn't a paycheck, it was a bonus check. I think it was about 30,000 bucks, taxable. That's the only problem with that. So I get this check and I went, holy mackerel. So I was excited, but I was also disturbed. And so this other guy comes up to me, his name was John. And John says to me this, you're going to be back. I said, why? He says, because you're going to fail. I looked at him and I said, look, few expletive words. Because that's what he did. He left Xerox, failed, and he came back. I said, look, you fail and you came back, but I'm gonna fail and I'm never coming back. And that's the attitude. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. If you say, well, if I fail, I'll go back to mommy and daddy, then that's what you'll do. So if you fail, that's when I became an entrepreneur, because I had no money. I had no money for years. Yeah, I didn't have a paycheck. But that's what my rich dad encouraged me to do. He says, when you don't have this paycheck, you get hungrier, smarter, and it's a test of your character. Will you become a crook? Will you become dishonest? Will you cheat and steal? Or will you become a better human being? So really, that's the benefit of becoming an entrepreneur. You really find out who you are when you don't have anything. So you always have to look at the big picture. Too many people look at, well, what's gonna happen to me? When you look at the big picture, you're also gonna know that when something bad happens, something good is gonna happen. But you gotta prepare for whatever is coming. If you think the next 20 years will be like the last 20 years, you're gonna get creamed. When you and I go to the supermarket and we buy a carton of milk, we always check for the expiration date. But most people do not check for the expiration date on their brains. Instead of getting out of debt, I get into debt. I just refinanced $300 million in debt. I went from 5% to 2.5% interest. I made a fortune. Every month, more money comes in because my cost of money has gone down. So while some financial experts are saying get out of debt, I'm saying learn how to use debt. See, when I came back from serving in Vietnam in January of '73, the first thing my rich dad said to me was, go to school to learn how to invest in real estate. It wasn't real estate, it was how to use debt and taxes. Debt and taxes make the rich richer. Debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. So all the rich guys who are doctors and lawyers or You know, those guys, they're getting creamed, and they don't know why. Doctors are getting creamed. Oh yeah, they're making more money, but the take home is less. You know, my doctor just yelled at me. He's happy. He says, oh, guess what? I finally made $1 million. And I said, yeah, this is just 3 weeks ago. And so I said, yeah, well, how much do you pay in tax? He says, $750,000, 0 cents in taxes. So his net was about $400,000, 0 cents. That's not bad. But when I make $1 million, I keep $1 million. And the reason is because I don't make it by working for money. See, if you work for money, you're taxed. So that's why lesson number 1 in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is, the rich don't work for money. What we do instead is we create businesses as entrepreneurs. We acquire real estate. I don't invest in the stock market. So the reason is because as entrepreneurs, I have more control over my income, how much I make, and how much I pay in taxes. And because I'm an entrepreneur as well as an investor in real estate, I pay 0 tax. So every time I make, let's say, $1 million as an entrepreneur, I immediately invest it in real estate, and I have a 4-to-1 step up. So I put $1 million in real estate, I get $4 million from the bank. That's why I love banks. But the banks are screwing everybody else. You know, terrible, but it's good for me. I thought you said when you print, it's good for you, but when you print, it's bad for people that work for money. Because when you print, savers get creamed, and people who work for money get creamed. When they print, debtors get rich. You see, debt and taxes make the rich richer, and debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. When we have obsolete ideas, we get obsolete results. So what's happening for most people? The idea of going to school, getting a job, working hard, saving money, getting out of debt, buying your house because it's an asset, and investing for a long term, it's obsolete. The world has changed. The world changed in 1971 when President Nixon took us off the gold standard and money became debt. What if we get rid of school? Then what would happen? Would it be better if we had no educational system at all? No, I'm saying education was more important before. It's just obsolete. You know, there's Moore's Law, which states information doubles every 18 months. In other words, everything is obsolete, 18 months. And this is a recent phenomenon. So when you come out of school, you're already obsolete. And that's why I'm the old guy. You know, I meet my friends, I went to Harvard. Yeah, I went to Harvard. I said, yeah, that was how long? 50 years ago. Today, the banks are charging you interest to save money. In other words, the banks don't want your money because they printed too much of it. And that's why there's bubbles in stocks and bubbles in real estate and all this. People dumping the cash because, as I said in here, savers are losers and cash is trash. And yet people are, well, I want a high-paid job. Well, that's an obsolete idea. Get out of debt is an obsolete idea. You should learn how to get into debt. How do you use debt to get rich? And they'll never teach you about taxes. The reason the 1% is way up here and the 99% are going this way is because when you print money, 2 things happen: inflation and taxes. It's crushing them. And any entrepreneur that thinks, I'm just gonna make money and start a business and make a lot of money because that's what we talk about, they really have got to smell the roses, man. You know, that's not what the real entrepreneurs are doing. Most entrepreneurs, there's 28 million small business owners in America. 24 million are one-person entrepreneurs. They're called non-employee entrepreneurs. So and that's what happens is when people don't really understand what an entrepreneur does. So most people are self-employed, but they're not really entrepreneurs. The self-employed pay the highest taxes of all, and nobody tells them that. Yeah, it's also called the entrepreneurial spirit, but what we're actually talking about was there's no such thing as a bad economy. For those externally, you and I, we all have an external economy. But we also have an internal economy, and the willpower is to change our internal economy. So for me, I can see the good, I can see the bad, I don't really give a damn, because I'm gonna be rich anyway. But a poor person with a poor personal economy, all they're gonna see is a bad economy, because they don't know how to make money in any economy. And a middle-class person, they have a middle-class economy. You know what they want? Is a nice house, a steady paycheck, and a job in the car. And so when you take their job away to them, that's disaster. Well, since an entrepreneur doesn't have a job anyway, it's no big deal. So all I'm saying to people is what Bucky Fuller taught me. There's always two sides, you know what I mean? You know, to use plural, at minimum two. So if you think the economy is bad, it's because your economy is bad. If you think that steady, employment is important, then you'll see an economy without jobs. Your economy. So your economy versus the external economy, where you control vs where you can't control. I can control, yes. It's called an internal focus versus an external focus. So the real entrepreneur has an internal focus, but if they fall down, they say, oh, this is good, because I'm gonna go up higher. The average person will fall down and say, oh, I'm gonna take some Prozac. or somebody has the mistakes. All the mistakes don't matter well. Mistakes matter. Means you didn't know something. But a real entrepreneur, whether they fall down or they always can go up. They can stand back up and go higher. That no matter what happens to them, they got stronger and better and smarter and happier. But a person with a weak internal mindset is that they're so afraid of what happens, it generally happens. Like, people who are afraid of losing their jobs, they generally lose their jobs. You know what I mean? Yeah, no doubt. So everything comes through you. Yeah, so the entrepreneur's first job is control inside here, not outside there. The moment you take that paycheck, you're an employee. You've got to be stronger than that. It's about inside control. You see, the problem with most people is they think money is real. Money is not real. Money is an idea backed by confidence or lack of it. And when you look at a dollar bill, what is it? It's just a piece of paper. The only reason it has value is because people believe it does. The moment people stop believing, it becomes worthless. That's why the rich don't chase money. They chase assets. Things that put money in their pocket, whether they work or not. Most people are taught to work for money. The rich are taught to have money work for them. That's the fundamental difference. My poor dad, my real dad, was a highly educated man. PhD. Worked hard his whole life, believed in the system. And what did he get? A pension that barely covered his bills, stress, and a life of financial struggle. My rich dad, he barely finished high school, but he understood money. He knew how the game was played, and he died a multimillionaire, leaving behind assets that still generate cash today. So ask yourself, who is really smarter? System is designed to keep you working. Think about it. You get a job, you get a paycheck. You spend that paycheck on bills, taxes, and liabilities. Then you need another paycheck. It's a treadmill, and most people never get off. The rich don't play that game. They own businesses. They own real estate. They own intellectual property. They don't trade time for money. They build systems that make money while they sleep. You ever wonder why the rich keep getting richer, even in a bad economy? It's because they don't depend on a job. They don't depend on a paycheck. They depend on their ability to adapt, to see opportunities where others see crises. The 2008 financial crash, the rich got richer. The pandemic, the rich got richer. Inflation, the rich got richer. Why? Because they understand the rules of the game, and the rules are simple. Money is debt. The more debt you understand, the richer you can become. Taxes are optional if you know how the tax code works. Assets feed you. Liabilities eat you. Most people are drowning in liabilities they think are assets. Their house, their car, their credit card points. The rich, they own apartment buildings, businesses, stocks, oil wells, patents, things that pay them, not things they pay for. You want to be rich? Stop thinking like an employee. Employees ask, what's the salary? Entrepreneurs ask, what's the upside? Employees say, that's too risky. Entrepreneurs say, how can I manage the risk? Employees worry about job security. Entrepreneurs create their own security. Not about working harder, it's about thinking differently. The biggest lie ever sold? Go to school, get a job, work hard, retire with a pension. That might have worked in 1950. Doesn't work today. Pensions are gone. Social Security is a joke. Inflation eats savings alive. And yet, people still follow the same old advice like lemmings off a cliff. You know what's funny? The people who give that advice, the teachers, the politicians, the financial experts, most of them are broke. Why would you take money advice from someone who's not rich? My rich dad used to say, if you want to get rich, study the rich. Don't study the poor. Most people study poverty. They watch the news, they listen to fear, they follow the herd. The rich study wealth. They read books, they find mentors, they take calculated risks. You ever notice how the rich always seem to be in the right place at the right time? It's not luck. It's because they understand cycles. Economies go up and down, markets boom and crash. The rich don't panic, they prepare. When the market crashes, they buy. When everyone's fearful, they invest. Warren Buffett said it best: be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. But most people do the opposite. They buy high, sell low, and wonder why they're broke. The rich don't follow the crowd, they lead it. You want to know the real secret? The rich don't just make money, they print it. Right, this is, I'm gonna do this or that. I mean, this is not literally, well, sometimes, if you're a central bank. But they understand how to use debt, how to leverage assets, how to create value out of thin air. Most people think debt is bad. The rich know debt is a tool, one of the most powerful tools in existence. Good debt makes you rich. Bad debt makes you poor. Mortgages on rental properties, good debt. Credit card debt for a vacation, bad debt. Business loans that generate cash flow, good debt. Car loans that lose value, bad debt. The rich use debt to buy assets. The poor use debt to buy liabilities. And the middle class, they think they're smart by avoiding debt altogether, missing the biggest wealth building tool in history. You know what's even crazier? The tax system rewards debt. The government taxes income, but they subsidize debt. You take out a mortgage, you get a tax deduction. You buy a business with debt, you pay less in taxes. But if you save money, they tax your interest. If you work for a paycheck, they take half before you even see it. The system is rigged. The question is, are you going to keep getting played, or are you going to learn the rules? The rich don't just play the game, they change the rules. Why? You know why most people stay poor? Because they're waiting for permission, waiting for a raise, waiting for the right time to invest, waiting for someone to give them a chance. The rich don't wait, they act. They don't ask, can I? They say, how can I? You want to start a business, but don't have money? Bootstrap it. Find a partner. Sell pre-orders. You want to invest in real estate, but don't have a down payment? Find a private lender. Seller financing. Creative deals. There's always a way, if you're willing to look for it. Most people would rather stay comfortable than get rich. They'd rather have security than freedom. They'd rather follow the rules than question them. And that's exactly why they stay average. The path to wealth isn't a secret, it's just unpopular. It requires risk. It requires failure. It requires thinking differently. Most people aren't willing to do that. Right.